What I think it is that most people...
Same old phone?
Let me turn this down. I think what it is with most people that that bothers, old enough to say us, is like if I see movies like The Matrix, and there's all these movies that suggest, and I've seen it, that there's something that's very much synthetic that isn't real about this place. And I have no better term for it than The Matrix. It's just like, part of it is that it's inevitable that we have to make some story. We have to make up something because we don't have direct access to reality as it is. We're just finite creatures, so we only know so much, so we have to create a story in order to understand it. And that story is going to be off. It's not going to be like the exact way that things are. So some of it is synthetic by default. It's because we have perceptions that aren't our sensations, they're perceptions, they're reflections of reflections in the pool. So it's not like the actual stuff as it actually is. And so because of that, we have three different camps, or as I call them, paradigms. There's three different paradigms as to what exactly is real. Since we don't know, we have to guess. Because you can't just sit there and go, well, nothing is real. If you say nothing is real, because I've been there, that is a hell. Oh my God. That sucks so bad. Nothing is real. So like, if nothing is real, then not even that is real. Not even the fact that nothing is real. And also, nothing itself, like the absence of everything, is real. Well, you can... Descartes said and purported that you can't doubt your own existence, but you actually can. And that's what that is. When you say nothing is real, that means not even I am real. And it can happen. You can lose yourself. You can become synthetic to yourself, where everything is like you're an alien in your own life. You don't understand yourself, or you don't know who you are. You lose your way. And that leads to depression and anxiety and hatred and suffering. And that's natural. It happens because there's that gap in between what is real, or the real, and my perception of the real. Just like there's a gap between my name and my identity, who I actually am. And my identity is my soul, my mind, and my body. And they should agree. 2 out of the 3 of those should agree. Not all of them always will be in alignment, but 2 out of the 3 of them should agree. So this whole thing about like transgendered people and all this stuff, that's been all the rage lately, and talking about, you have to be tolerant and all of this stuff. And it keeps going and keeps going. And it looks like they pushed it so it was like, okay, in the beginning, there was discrimination, and it was rich white male landowners that had all the power, and those, it was self-evident at the time, were created equal, and no one else was equal to them, right? And that was real, and that did happen, and those people were discriminant, and they did have racism and sexism, and found racism and sexism to be self-evident. They didn't think that there was anything that you could question about it. It was so unquestionable that it was written into the Declaration of Independence that it was self-evident that all men are created equal, and that was self-evident that it only applied to rich white landowning males. And it's just strange that that would be self-evident. Now we would think that's not self-evident at all. And for somebody to say that it is just ludicrous. Because we've been inundated and in the aftermath of having found that was self-evident at one point, we saw the consequences of it. Slavery, sexism, wife beating, treating children and women and black people as if they were property. And it really did have an evil undertone to it. And there is evil in it. It's not, the liberals are not evil for saying that people deserve rights by any stretch of the imagination. But I find it bizarre that people would find it self-evident that I did. See, and so it goes on and on and on. It's really weird that people have twisted the old discriminatory worldview on its head so that it's just as discriminant as it always has ever been. It's just as evil and rotten to the core as it's always been. It's just changing its mask. It's just changing the way that it's facing. Now, instead of facing away from rich, white, landowning males, now it's facing toward them. So the only difference is in the way that it's facing. It's still the same evil system. And I stress the word evil. And then we have to define what is evil while we're at this ontological investigation. What is evil? Well, that is when you value something that exists as if it were nothing, as if it were completely devoid of value or purpose or meaning or reason, and everybody does this to some degree. It's just how much do we do it, and we should always do it less, ideally. At least be aware when we're doing it. When we say rich white landowning males have no purpose, have no value, eat the rich, they aren't people, don't exist, etc. Okay, whitey. What does that mean? Is that self-evident to you? So it's very strange what we seem to find self-evident ain't quite so self-evident after all. It's actually a labyrinth. It's a matrix of all these possible worldviews. There's three main ones though. And all three of them value something as if it were nothing. So all three of these paradigms are wrong. And all three of them know it about each other, but not about themselves. The liberals know that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and so do the conservatives, but they blame each other. And then they stop there. They don't ever look at themselves and go, oh, well, maybe it is me. They don't question it. They find it self-evident that all men are created equal. So, the three paradigms that I've found is you've got realism, which is really big in the conservative camp nowadays. Realism is the idea that there is an independent, objective reality. And it, being independent of my mind, should be a measure for my mind. Because if I go crazy, how do I set myself sane? By what landmark, by what orientation, by what assertion do I use in order to guide me back to sanity? So the realist says you use the objective world. So you've got pragmatism. If it works, then it's true. Which means all spiders are poisonous because it works in the sense that it keeps you safe. The few spiders, and it is few, that are lethally poisonous, like black widows and stuff, those are so rare, and yet they do exist. So if you were to say, no, actually only some spiders are poisonous, it might lead us to get poisoned, even though that's true. So pragmatism says, depending on how you define the word truth, pragmatism says, well, there's something wrong with that because it doesn't work well. And given the objective reality is the thing that should be justifying my sanity and my reason, I will bend my mind to it. And thinking, the act of thinking, is the mind bending to the whim of the idea. We all are possessed by ideas. We don't possess ideas. We are possessed by ideas. Ideas have us, and we serve them with our minds. We think so that we can find ways of manifesting and fulfilling them in the objective world. And I'll grant the objective realists that. That is true. However, there's more than just the objective world. What is an idea? An idea itself. What is my mind? Is my mind objective? Well, I have an objective brain because it's made out of objective materials, right? So my senses must be objective, but they aren't. As we've seen with the lukewarm water experiment, if you put your left hand in hot water and your right hand in cold water, and then you put both of them in lukewarm water, then your left hand will tell you it's cold and your right hand will tell you it's hot. And neither of them will tell you it's lukewarm. So your senses aren't objective. And our perceptions, our eyewitness testimony is malleable at best, discriminatory at worst. Our ability to remember, they have false memory implants at therapists where they'll tell you that you had some kind of an old childhood traumatic repressed memory. That used to be a big thing back in the day, especially with things like alien abductions. There's people running around that actually think that they have that. Who knows if they have or not, but it's quite possible that they just had a false memory. There's people that think that they're Jesus. Did you forget that you shot yourself? Did you forget you burped in class? Did you forget you picked your nose and flicked it at your neighbor because you were a little kid and thought it was funny? Did you forget that you did that? Did you forget that you farted and blamed it on the dog? Lied to your mom about your homework being done when it wasn't? Kicked your sister in the shins because she looked at you funny? So there's all these kinds of things that happen in our minds that make it not objective. So even if there is an objective independent reality, we don't know what it is because our senses aren't objective, and that's the only thing that we have. By what other means do we ascertain what the objective world is? Well, actually there is. There's math. You can use mathematics to analyze what is real and what isn't objectively, because math is an objective system. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what your skin color is, doesn't matter how fat or skinny you are, math is still math, and everybody knows how to do math. We may not all do it well, or do it to the most advanced degree, but we can all check each other's work, we can check our own work, we know when an answer is right, we all know 2 + 2 = 4. So, the problem again arises when we look into the details. It seems on its face like, oh, well, yeah, you can know the objective world by using math. So if there is a discrepancy in my sensations, then I can just use mathematics to determine the temperature of the water is lukewarm. Fine, that's fine. But what is lukewarm? What does that mean? Oh, well, it's 70 degrees in temperature. And what does that mean? It means that there's a certain amount of vibration in the atoms, and there's a certain amount of excitation, a certain amount of movement, a certain amount of jostling back and forth, friction, all that. And so then we're just describing a change in energy. And what is energy? And then the class goes quiet. What is energy? No one knows. So if no one knows how to define what energy is, except for some vagary, something like change. And there's scientists that'll tell you that energy isn't even substantial. It's just an idea that helps us keep track of changes. It's kind of like entropy. It doesn't exist as a physical object. It's not an artifact. It's nothing that you'll find physically in the universe. It's just an idea, but it gets expressed physically. It gets manifested physically. Similarly, words are expressed physically, like I am now, but they aren't physical objects, and they don't have objective values. It depends on who's speaking and who they're speaking to, and in what tone, and at what time, and in what place, etc. And what their purpose seems to be, what their purpose actually is unknown, even to them. So there is no raw objective way of determining or ascertaining the actual absolute value of anything, no matter what paradigm you're using, even objective realism. Given that, objective realism seems to have so many flaws in it that we have to just toss it out the window, but wait, there's more. there's also something wrong with anti-realism. So anti-realism is the opposite of realism. It says, okay, there might be an objective reality, but even if there is, we'll never know what that is. We can't directly access the real, so we don't know if there even is a real objective world. But if there is, we wouldn't know what it is. We can't measure it against what? The objective world is the objective world. What do we use to measure that? Well, something that's not objective, obviously, so then it's not a good measure. There's a translation error. So then we don't have an ability of saying what is anything anymore. Now we've dissolved into such proximity to nihilism that we don't even know if we should believe in anything. And if we do, then we're isolated little bubbles in an ocean of other possibilities, an infinitude of possible ways of interpreting the world now that we have relativity that guides our reasoning. So then we can go even further and we can say, no, everything is all just subjective art. There isn't any science. And we can go Alan Watts with it and claim that everything is ultimately wiggly. Where are the edges? Where are the edges at all in anything? You think that there's an edge, but then you zoom in and you find out there's this jagged, crazy coastline. You zoom in any further and you're going to find a solar system of difference between these jagged edges. They get blown up so big they become astronomical. Where's the edge now? Now it's just some diffusion, some cloud in the sky, as everything is. If we zoom in or zoom out enough at the largest absolute scales, everything is this amorphous blob of who the fuck knows what it is, because there's only one everything, and everything can't look into its own eyes or touch its own fingers or taste its own tongue. And so because of that, then we run into nihilism and we say nothing is real. But wait, there's more. If nothing is real, then the fact that nothing is real is not real. And now we're so far deep into I don't know what the fuck this is that not even nothing is real anymore. And that's the state at which we understand what is real also, by negating this state where we say we've thrown up our hands in the air and we've said I have no words and everything is false, including what I just said. Then there's no real. Then there is no such thing as reality now. So therefore, the negation of what this state is must be real. So what is this state? Well, it's the state where we don't know what anything is. Okay, well then the state of reality must be the state in which we do know what something is. And there aren't any edges. So then the reality that must exist must have edges if we're going to function. So it has edges, it has limits. Everything in reality has limits. And by these limits, we can define what that is and what that isn't. And we can say, objectively, there is an objective world. Subjectively, there is a subjective world. And relatively, there is a relative world. And we use the paradigms only within the domains that they're correspondent with. So objective realism is fine if we're dealing with if everything else has already been set and the only thing left to figure out is the objective. If we've already decided what our subjective and relative views and paradigms say about what is reality, then all we have to do is apply it through objective realism. And you'll notice that one of the running themes in objective realism is this obsession with this absolute truth, this one ring to bind them all in the darkness kind of a thing. It's the ring of power. We must have it. We must know what is the real. We must know what is the one truth, right? And so anybody that isn't an objective realist will laugh at that and find it childish and immature and silly. But an objective realist will get offended and serious about it and have all the solemnity of a 10-year-old boy when he's confronted with death the first time. It looks like that when you see it. And it's like, but. And they defend it. And it vehemently sometimes, passionately, solemnly, seriously. But yet, their worldview, the objective realist worldview, can only say what is real inside of the objective real world as they see it. The objective physical world, I should say. And that's as far as it goes. Anything beyond that, they can't say anything about it. So, we've realized that the resolution to this paradigmatic conflict between realism and anti-realism is simple. You just have a domain for each. And you say, okay, when I have a subjective dilemma, then I'll go to the anti-realists. When I have an objective dilemma, then I'll go to the objective realists. And as you should, that's what makes sense. You use a hammer to hammer in a nail, you don't use a screwdriver. And you don't use a hammer to screw in a screw, you use a screwdriver. And so you use the right tool for the right job, and that solves that problem. And so then we can actually combine anti-realism and realism into the same paradigm, larger paradigm, meta-paradigm now, where we say the subjective is real to the subject, the objective is real to the object, the relative is real to the relation. And within these domains only should we use these strict paradigms, knowing ultimately that they all get intertwined in the end. They're all part of one giant meta paradigm. So when there's an artistic dilemma at hand, I don't know what I feel like, well, then you have to use an anti-realist paradigm. You can't defer back to your body to define what your mind is. Your brain doesn't tell you anything about what your mind is doing when it's thinking. That gap is infinite. Now, there's people that will say, yeah, but it's the neurons. What does that mean? Can you really tell me that you've been able to translate the act of a thought coming into being through mapping neural networks? That's like saying I can draw a tree into existence. Well, it has the same outlines, it looks the same, it has the same shape, it has the same objective arrangement. Why isn't it a tree? Because it's a symbol of a tree. And that's what your mind does when it thinks, is it comes up with representative images and sounds and symbols that represent the objective reality. And actually, they don't even represent that. They represent our sensations, which represent physical reality. And not only do we have thoughts about physical reality, or at least our sensations of it, we also have thoughts about our souls, our subjective experience of these sensations. I feel happy, I feel anxious, I feel unnerved, I feel uneasy. And we build those associations into those sensations also in order to create a thought. A perceptive thought is an intuitive, subjective, emotive reaction combined with a sensory experience. And you combine both of those into one thing and it becomes a perception. But it's greater than the sum of its parts, because you can't just scattershot a bunch of bodily sensations and randomly assign them some emotive value and then walk out with a perception at the end. There's a rationale and a coherence between all of those associations that builds into a story or a narrative or a paradigm or a meta-paradigm. What we choose to do with that story is, like Neo says in The Matrix, we must leave it up to each other. So for ourselves, we define which story we live in, and we shouldn't limit it to an all-encompassing paradigm. We should have a meta-paradigm where we're able to compare paradigms with each other and use the right tool for the right job at the right time in the right place. And our purpose is what defines all of that. Purpose is the ultimate measure of all things. Without purpose, then we run into that nihilistic, edgeless wiggliness that no one knows what it is thing. And that's purposelessness. That's the hell of nihilism, is meaningless, purposeless, directionless, pointless existence. So purpose is what defines all other things, because without purpose there's hell. So we must have purpose. So then finally, if purpose is what measures meta paradigms, and meta paradigms are what measure paradigms, etc., all the way down, what is it that measures purpose? And how do we know which purpose we should have? So it does have some looping where it's like, well, the consequences in the objective world to your body, in the relative world to your mind, and in the subjective world to your soul, those consequences to those three parts of yourself do matter, but they don't define the purpose, because you could get the same treatment. I mean, look at Jesus. He had his body go through hell. His mind went through hell, and at the end of it, he said, God, why hast thou forsaken me? His soul went to hell. So then what the hell is the purpose of that? All three of his parts of his self were tortured to the utmost limit that they could possibly be tortured. Confronted with absolute hell. Your body is in agony. Your mind is shattered. Your soul is mired in pointlessness. Pure, absolute hell. What is the purpose of that? Love. He said, love one another as I have loved you, to his disciples. And then when we find that purpose, it's like electrifying. It's like, oh my God, that's it. That must be it. But yet we fall short of it, because it's like, but that's so over the top. No one could ever do that. I couldn't do that. Why should I bother doing that? No one else is going to do that. But yet, you can't shake the feeling that it's like, oh my God, there's something to that. And it's not the sacrifice. It's, if it were only the suffering, and this is the one contention that I have with Dr. Peterson, and I just realized it, is he gets one thing wrong. It's not about the sacrifice. It's not about how much I gave, how much I spent. If I spend $1 million on a meal, it won't make it taste any better than spending $10,000 on it. It's still an exorbitantly expensive meal. It's not going to make it taste any better. There's a certain plateau beyond which it won't go any further. There's something else. Because I could cut myself over and over. That's a sacrifice. I am in pain. I'm sacrificing my body. There's something else to it. And the sacrifice is for something else. It's not just the sacrifice. It's sacrificing for something. And it's that something that matters more than the sacrifice does. And that's why Jesus says, I look for mercy, and I ask of you mercy, not sacrifice. Love is when we share values. It's when I say, I have valued you above nothing, such that I care about you, such that you have a meaning in my life. Now, it might not be fun sometimes. It might be suffering. It might be agonizing, but it is meaningful because it's shared, because it's not just me. What is it that makes nothing? Nothing is isolation. I don't know what anything is, and therefore I don't know where to go, because I am isolated in a sea of dissolved infinitude of nihilism and pointlessness. Therefore I am in hell. Therefore the negation of that must be heaven. So if I'm in isolation in hell, then heaven must be a relation. Heaven must be something that is shared, something that's collectivized, or at the very least is grouped into some tribal thing, like ants holding on to each other, making a living raft so they don't all die. That's what heaven is. And that is what reality is. And that is what truth is. And the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.